omnichannel strategy, how it's evolving, and how it coincides with our media plan. Do a quick round of introductions. I'm your moderator, John Kagan. Anybody who's been coming here for at least a year has seen me or tolerated me or put up with my BS. The director of paid media at Amsive. That's you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Davis. This is my first media post event. My career has spanned over digital and brand marketing. Currently, the director of digital marketing at Dave & Buster's, which the role is a little unique, in which I oversee our paid digital media strategy, as well as I oversee the UX and UI for our digital platforms like web, kiosk, and app.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. Oh, and by the way, last year Dave & Buster's bought Main Event, so I'm doing that for both brands.
Dang. More power to you. Hi, everyone. My name is Yuji Inagaki. I'm a director of SEM at LendingTree. I don't have as much responsibility as you do. I only focus on search side. However, I am very, very much interested in omnichannel marketing, even though I am, siloed in the SEM world for my organization. I do spend a lot of time talking to my social team, my display team, the affiliates team, CRM, the whole nine. So very interested and just as curious as you guys about what is happening with omnichannel and how do we evolve.
Hi, I'm Annie Stickney. I've been here for a while. I thank you so much for letting me come back. I really enjoy it. I've been in the industry for about 16 years. I've been at JP Morgan Chase for almost 9 years, which is incredibly long. And I'm actually on the Omnichannel Analytics team. So this is kind of my wheelhouse. So I run paid and organic search analytics, but I've also been highly involved in all of our privacy and compliance work for the past 2 years. So, yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so let's dig into the, I don't want to call it the softball, but the high-level question that we all agreed would be the easiest to answer, and then spend 30 minutes trying to explain it. What does omnichannel mean to you all?
Yeah, so for me, in the simplest form, it really is thinking about how today customers are consuming content across different platforms and channels. So it could be brick and mortar, .com, mobile, events, apps, and really just as a brand ensuring that I'm delivering a really integrated and cohesive message across every channel and platform. And so it also really is a step above like a multi-channel strategy, in the sense that there's the data integration where I'm really trying to make sure that I can stitch together a holistic consumer journey to deliver that tailored experience, whether it's offline or online.
So my take of omnichannel marketing is that, and I want to kind of reference back to what Dan said earlier about how they had to change their messaging for like Twitch and to be more gamer-centric. So that is, to me, what omnichannel is that you have different touch points, and each of these touch points, the audiences may interact with you differently. You have to have different messages, different frequencies. I mentioned frequency. Different frequencies, and then as they go down the funnel, sometimes you might have to continue that messaging so the person going down that funnel doesn't feel like there's any kind of disconnect, feels like they're going down a sort of like a customer's journey that's like very seamless for them. And making sure that a lot of our advertisements and touch points aren't disruptive either. Like, again, it needs to be seamless. It needs to be almost like kind of organic from their standpoint. So that's where I'll leave it at.
For us, or for me specifically, it means finally working together with other channels instead of working in a silo and then wondering why your campaign didn't work out at the end of the month. It also means, let's see, what did I have in my notes? Oh yeah, so like in a cookieless world, it's almost essential to have omni-channel strategy, because if you don't have any type of tracking between ads together, you have to look at incrementality testing. And putting it all together. So it's really the king of the future is omni-channel and incrementality testing is what I see.
So we have 3 different sort of definitions, all of them kind of playing with one another. I'm going to give in the 4th one that's also kind of in that scenario. Is when we view omni-channel, we view all forms of media, whether it's online, offline together, but they all work towards a single common goal. The nice way of saying it is, as much as I really dislike it, Performance Max goes in that direction where we have multiple media touch points all coming together. But in this scenario, we also pull in the traditional, the direct mail, and the linear. But yeah. So here's where we're going to make it a little bit more complicated as we throw around the industry buzz terms. How do you define omni-channel strategy versus that of holistic strategy? And are you forced to take a different approach for each kind?
Yeah, so for me, how we're interpreting holistic strategy really is kind of like at the core of my role. And so the fact that I sit across digital paid media as well as the UX and UI, we're integrating all digital initiatives. It's ensuring that like the product and IT roadmap aligns with the marketing roadmap and vice versa. So once again, just having that kind of unified goal across all of our digital initiatives and not just looking at the customer experience from a marketing perspective.
So I'm going to use specifically the lending tree definition of omnichannel versus holistic because it's also kind of like the journey of what we're going through from a transition perspective. So from a holistic perspective, I think we're doing pretty well as that. And my definition of holistic is that, we have all the different touch points, the upper, the middle, the lower funnel. So we got the display stuff going on. We got social, we got search. So everybody has their touch points. So if you were to go online and search for Lending Tree, or if you get tagged by us in some way, shape, or form, you get hit by remarketing, like Lending Tree is going to somehow find you. So we kind of have that coverage. But then omnichannel marketing is the next step, which is now we got to connect all of our channels together. Because right now we got display working with their budget and then their revenue goal. We have social with a separate revenue goal. We have SCM with a separate revenue goal, which doesn't really work at the end of the day as far as like trying to put everyone together. So now there needs to be a connection about like, how did the first interaction with display, someone saw a video, they didn't click on it, but then they eventually 5 days later searched on SCM, they go to our site, they leave, they come back direct, and then they finally like create a lead. Like, how do we connect all that together? And that's where we're currently in the process of switching over to.
Yeah, you kind of stole my answer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, so for us, it means having like a holistic message. So having the same message in all the channels, having the same message in programmatic and in paid search. And at the end of the day, knowing the entire funnel and knowing how to address that customer at each stage of the journey. So if it's programmatic, that's probably going to be more of an engagement message. If it's branded paid search, that's going to be more of an acquisition message. But if you have the same, to use a phrase like scent trail, with all of the different channels together, that's a holistic channel and they're all working together and it's all omni.
So one thing that we look at in-house is we view holistic more so on the measurement side. So omni is the approach of how all media works together. Holistic is when we look at it is how do we measure it? So when we look at CTR, we don't look at paid search. We look at paid, organic, direct altogether. Various scenarios to show that, and that helps us decide how we allocate our funds for the next step. So it's, the way we all often call it is a regional terminology. It means one thing to one person, but we call it a different thing for another. So hopping into it, future state with, let's talk about the fun subject that everyone here probably, with the exception of Brave, sorry guys, privacy regulations and how it's going to impact roughly everyone here from a way of tracking, including the cookie deprecation. How is it going to impact your approach for omnichannel?
Yeah, so for me, on both of our brands, we don't have a ton of first-party data. So we're still leveraging a lot of third-party data and signals. And so for us, we're in conversations now of like, how do we grow our first-party data? Like, what is that value exchange that we need to offer our customers to make them feel comfortable, like, joining our database? So is that through our loyalty program? Is it email opt-ins? Is it something on our website? You know, we've seen brands do memberships and subscription programs. Not sure how that would work with like a Dave & Buster's or Main Event, but those are the conversations we're having internally because we know that just as the industry evolves, like this is gonna impact when we want to do more personalization as well as how we're optimizing our media.
I can take it from like a good and a bad way of looking at it. So the bad way, obviously, we all know is that without the cookies and whatnot, like it's harder to track users and to personalize their experiences, you know, something that's tailored more to them. We have to kind of do like a step back and be a little bit more like aggregated as like how we personalize people. So it's like if we were like personalizing down to like every 100 people gets to see certain ads, we got to go back to like every 1,000 people now see the same ads. Like that's the downside of it. But then the upside of the privacy regulation is that it does kind of force us to, again, kind of be a little bit more creative about, all right, how do we make sure that this customer trusts us? Because that's now the only way that they're going to give us their data, which is the first-party data, right? So we have to be more smart about how do we connect with the audiences, how do they end up trusting us so they give us a little bit of their information enough that now we can start to personalize things for them. So there's this extra step that you have to take, but I feel like over the next few years, it will be for the good. And we'll start to see the separations between who's really there for the customers versus who's really out there just to make a quick buck.
And also frequency capping.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, so it 100% impacts it. So California is almost essentially out, and that's one of our biggest populations. Other states are in the middle of drafting regulations that are very similar, but probably different as well. And then thirdly, Google is about to deprecate third-party cookies as well. So as of June of next year, we're all going to be very much in the dark. So it really kind of pivots to and favors the larger companies that have the technology resources and have the ability to create your own first-party ad network. This sucks for the little guy because they don't have that type of technology. And so I feel like there's probably going to be a new wave of other companies coming in and saying, hey, we can do that for you. There's definitely a large area of like conjecture that I can think of like the waves of the future, new companies popping up to help out all these other little guys and even the big guys trying to figure out the first party network to try and have a little bit of personalization in a land of privacy, which is kind of contradictory.
So, I mean, our stance is we've been at the mercy of living in fear of cookie deprecation for, what, 4 years now? Google's kept pushing everything back further and further, thank goodness. So we are hugely reliant on first-party data, but because that you can't survive just off that, we've had to build an in-house proprietary platform that goes and collects first-party data from everything under the sun and then does its own in-house lookalike to try and basically do profiling of an individual for the long-term future. Right now it'll be likely the best way we can do it, other than relying on Google's first-party data as the cookie deprecation impacts everyone, but roughly Google. So Annie already touched on it a little bit, but how are the state regulations, or what's your approach to dealing with some of the state regulations? So there's CCPA out in California, or even from the national perspective, although it didn't happen, but a potential repeal of Section 230 and how that would impact various online platforms. Does that impact how you all approach things?
Not so much yet. It's once again just something that's like really on our radar. We've definitely had to hire more resources within our like legal team to help as we navigate this landscape. I think for us, a lot of times when it comes to state regulations, it's kind of the stuff that you expect, where like Dave & Buster's isn't just an arcade, but it's also, you know, a bar. And so we're navigating like alcohol laws and understanding like how we have to customize our creative for different states. And then it leads into the, you know, website. Like we get flagged more than I would like to say from like a Google or Facebook about our landing page showing someone with a beer. So those are the things that we're really focused on trying to clean up and monitor.
So state regulations hasn't hit us yet as far as like, you know, limiting our availability to advertise. But like, for example, like CCPA, my understanding is that it's just like a disclosure of information. There hasn't been any kind of like an active like, don't do this, you can't do that. It's more about like letting the consumers know what's exactly how, you know, things are being tracked, and if they want to opt out, they can. But it's one of those things, it's like, to me right now, CCPA is kind of like terms and condition agreement where people don't really care. They're just like, yeah, I agree, whatever. You know, so, but in the future, as more states to kind of create their own regulations, that does start to create a little bit of more obstacle because, you know, right now with LendingTree, we mostly do just national targeting. And then obviously there are certain states that we have to be a little bit more careful about because of financial regulations, but that will start to go away and we have to be more tactical about like, all right, well, for, you know, Utah, I gotta say one thing, and California, I gotta say another thing, Washington, say something else. So I think we will get there, but as of today, it hasn't really affected us yet.
I feel like Sephora and Cabela's would disagree with you on that one. They're currently in litigation because they are in violation of the cookie laws in California. And it's a $7,500 fine per cookie if you violate those laws. So you can understand that this is a large, large thing that we need to be aware of and treat with respect. And let's be honest, it's going to be completely different for all the other states that implement it. And so it really kind of boils down to having a whole privacy and regulation team to navigate all of that, and then working very closely with your ad tagging partner. Like trying to figure out if your ad network and your ad tagging software is able to say, oh, California, don't drop. If it's not in California, then drop. And not a lot of tagging platforms do that currently. But yeah, if you have the technology and the resources, I would highly recommend like becoming compliant with all the laws. And that's why you always see the banner pop up whenever you go to every single website and it says, do you accept cookies? It's literally because of the California CCPA Act. Nobody wants to be in violation of that, and so they are forcing everyone to opt in or opt out themselves. There's a lot of other techniques that, so like other companies are deciding not to put that banner on because they're being the most conservative they possibly can be and just not dropping it entirely because they're focused on the user journey. So we don't want to have like pop-ups all up in your face, but we're going to be really hyper cautious and respect users' privacy.
And when you talk about pop-up, it's those like accept cookies,
Yep.
like, and then they
So
take up like the
intrusive.
entire screen. Yeah.
Yep, that's
Oh my
exactly
gosh,
what it's
I
there
will
for.
exit out of some sites when I see that. It's
Yeah.
so annoying.
And how many times has your parents been like, should I accept this? I'm like, oh, good Lord. I'm like, as an advertiser, I'm like, yes, please.
So when it came to CCPA with the opt-in cookies, we actually looked at it as an opportunity. We've run in with a couple of our clients who I can't name where we actually put incentivizations, say, hey, accept the cookies, get 5% off your first purchase. It was another way just to get you in on the email list style thing, but it was just another way you could stack a coupon of a menial amount to get you into it. We've also looked at CCPA. I don't want to mock state regulations, but I will. We looked at it very much as a watered-down version of GDPR. If GDPR level or the right to be forgotten that we've seen in Germany, Belgium, and the UK ever came here, that's a much bigger problem. But really hasn't impacted us. The biggest thing that we had prepared for was if Section 230 was repealed, which it did not get repealed by the Supreme Court, because then we would basically have to pull out of social media if you had unregulation. And that we've already seen what happens with Twitter /X or whatever you want to call it today, and they're down, what, 75% in ad revenue because it's just a wasteland at this point. So that when we start seeing some of these other regulations that have more oomph to them come in, that's when we'll start looking at it as being more prepared, but it hasn't changed our strategy for the most part. So speaking of vast wasteland, let's talk.
Tell us how you really feel.
Speaking of vast wasteland, let's talk about macro scenarios, from our macroeconomics, potential recessions, to every civil unrest, to every unfortunate shooting that we have in the U.S. Does that change how you all approach from an omnichannel strategy?
It definitely does. So when I think about macroeconomics, I think the first thing is just like our messaging approach. So for us, it's being more value driven, which, you know, value lives on a spectrum. It could be like a price promotion. It could be like really conveying quality and why this is a good bang for your buck. And so right now we're doing a lot of promos like, you know, 20 for 20 that we potentially wouldn't have done in the past just because we know that consumers really need to see the value in why you should spend your dollar at Dave & Buster's, which you all should, versus going to one of our competitors, or even like our competitive landscape isn't just like a Topgolf or Chuck E. Cheese, but it's, you know, going out to eat at a restaurant. It's going, you know, to get your nails done or your hair done or whatever the case may be. So we need all that discretionary income, once again, at Dave & Buster's. Thank you.
Nice little plug right there.
Solid ROI.
Being in the finance industry, macroeconomics is a huge factor for us. We're very sensitive to this, and you know, the two obviously major factors that you guys all know is the pandemic and then currently the inflation right now. So pandemic was very interesting as far as in the finance lending world, just because there was this huge, it just immediately, like in day zero of the pandemic, the entire search landscape of changed. People were trying to get as much lending as possible because the rate went down to zero and it was very easy to borrow. And that was causing a lot of lending caps on our side. So we had to shut down our program like every day at like 11 a.m. because we're getting so much demand. But then that dies away, right? And once that dies away, now you got to start to understand what changed with the consumers. Like, why is it down? Well, now because things are starting to kind of research back. Everyone's kind of getting back into status quo. But then here comes the inflation. The Federal Reserve is starting to increase the rate. You know, now we're at like, what, 5.5? Currently, we were at like, what, 0.5 like earlier this year. So that in itself created a huge turmoil about lending options and what our lenders are available or not available with certain credit scores or tightening up their restrictions. So now we have to make a change on our side as well too, saying like, all right, lenders want this, but consumers want that. They're not matching up. How do we make it so they're both now working together? Messaging changes, audience targeting changes. Yeah, we changed a lot within the past 3 years. So every year, like I'm pretty sure some people will do like, hey, let's do a year-over-year review. We can't do that because 2020 was one way, 2021 we did a different way, 2022 completely different way. This year, again, completely different way. So I can never do a year-over-year comparison.
Compare against 2008?
Maybe, go all the way back there, yeah.
Yeah, we see the same thing. I mean, as like large companies, shifting strategies is not an easy task. But in terms of like macroeconomic things of like the pandemic, like, yeah, your message is going to change. People aren't looking to go traveling, so probably shouldn't have that advertising. Engagement messaging wasn't really necessary. People weren't really needing to have that, and so you put more of your dollars into the acquisition. And the same thing goes for what Mandy was talking about yesterday with geo-targeting. So let's say you're doing an incrementality test with geo-targeting. If there's a hurricane going through one of your geo-targeting areas of like, sign up for travel rewards. Yeah, people don't need to see that. And that kind of comes off as kind of off-brand and a little bit off-putting. People are just hoping to have like food and water the next day. So maybe turn off that strategy in that geo-targeting area. Yeah, your incrementality test is going to suffer at the end, but it's also going to help you and prevent against a lot of like reputational risk of having an off message at the wrong time.
I mean, the macroeconomic recession, paid media was a mixed bag. It didn't pull back as much, but we had to your point, change our messaging. What we've been dealing with more so is anytime there's a catastrophe, disaster of some sort, invasion, mass shooting, we sit there with our hand on the switch ready to flip it saying, all right, we have to pull out of display, we have to pull out of CTV, we have to pull out of social, anything that where our ads could be associated. We learned from the January 6th that we did not have a good brand safety for imminent or unexpected scenarios in place. So every time one comes around, we have to refine, revise, pull out of the media, evaluate, and then work with the brand to decide when is it appropriate to go back in, should we go back in, or where should we go back in. So speaking of disasters, let's talk about the pandemic. I can't say during the or since the pandemic, because technically I think we're still in it. I don't know if we are still technically in it, but how did your brand survive, struggle, or thrive throughout it? And what did you all have to change for your strategy, if anything?
So I'm gonna skip this question because I've only been with Dave & Buster's 8 months. Yeah.
What did you previously do at your other job?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, you know, at my previous employer, which you can go to my LinkedIn and see where that was at. You know, we really just changed, I think, once again, the value perception and how we were conveying value. It went from just saying, hey, this is the price of paper towels and, you know, toilet paper, but helping the consumer understand, like, how far that stretched you. And so it was like, you know, this really equates to, I don't know, like 50 visits to the restroom or whatever the case may be. But so really just trying to break it down in the simplest terms to help the consumers understand that, like, their dollars were truly stretching if they shopped with us. And the other aspect was really, we took approach where we were saying we were humanizing the brand. So I think that's also softening that hard, like, retail sell, but just like switching how we communicate to our customers and infusing more brand messaging than, you know, price point.
So the struggle actually came after the pandemic, because during the pandemic, it was a great financial year that time. Everyone's, you know, getting money left and right. Jerome Powell's printing money. Everyone's seen that meme before and all that kind of stuff. But then, once 2021, 2022 hit, and then 2023, obviously, when rates started to go up and things got a little bit more expensive, the struggle was actually starting to come out that a lot of people actually didn't know their financial health. Like that was actually like more publicized. It wasn't like a lending tree like study that we did. It was just out there saying like, wow, people actually really don't know like, what a mortgage rate interest like when it goes up, like what a refi is, what's the difference between 15 and 30, like what's origination points. Like they didn't have these understandings. So we're making a pivot right now to be more content heavy to educate people, because being in the financial industry, if people don't know finance, then they're not going to, even if they want to trust you, they don't understand how to trust you. So like you're kind of at a dead end. So we're, especially like this year, we're putting a lot of stuff on YouTube, like shorts and whatnot, just saying like 2-minute money, like, hey, this is what home equity is, and here's are the pros and cons. Hey, this is personal loans. What's the difference between these two? Well, if you have this and if you have that, you might be able to get this instead of that. Like, we're trying to help people out to kind of like really understand what specific products that they should get for their current financial situations. And then we're also trying to kind of help with their credit score, right? And I'm pretty sure like all the other places are doing that, like Credit Karma and whatnot. But we're also trying to be an advocate about like, hey guys, like these are the things you got to do to get your credit score up. Then your credit score will go up, the rates will go down, then you can borrow at a lesser rate. It's a long-term effect. We have to work on the lifetime value, and it's one of those things where we have to invest now and get the reward later. A lot of us want to invest now and get the reward now, but there's been a lot of changes where it's like, no, if we invest now and get the reward later, people trust more, and then that just kind of keeps happening, and then it's a spiral effect going upwards.
Yeah, I think that's a solid tactic, and we've been employing something very similar. You have to kind of follow the user interaction. So again, during the pandemic, let's be honest, nobody was traveling, but everybody was like, oh, I'm gonna buy a house in the Poconos. We'll never go back to work. I'm like, ooh, that's gonna be a long commute when we actually do have to go back into work. And so, yeah, like there was a lot of people taking out mortgages then, and now not so much. People are now realizing like, oh, I probably should focus on my financial health now. And so, yeah, like during the pandemic, non-branded activity wasn't really a big initiative because we just needed to get the bottom line done. But now we're really focusing heavily on the non-brand and getting like the same tactics of like, okay, here's some articles for financial health. We also have a big partnership with Kevin Hart, and he's very passionate about financial literacy. He has books and programs, and I think he now has a TV show called Heart of It All, where he really just wants to get into cities and lower income areas and teach everybody what financial literacy is. And yeah, I think it's a solid tactic, and we should all be employing that.
So I was with my prior agency during the peak of the pandemic, and I will admit we had a bit of an unfair advantage. We only had one client that was truly negatively impacted by the pandemic. They were an OTA who obviously had to shut down, only to actually reveal later that it was a Ponzi scheme and they were federally indicted, but that's a story for a different day.
Details.
But, yeah, my other side of my business, we were doing the vice categories: cannabis, fast food, and alcohol. So you can only imagine how well that did. And we ended up increasing our spends, I think 7x at one point, and all we had to do was change our messaging and say, hey, we are non-contact, we are here for you, and we are considered essential, and it can be delivered to your house. It worked out nicely. In a terrible situation, I should also note. Now, I promise this next question was not planned based off the prior session, but for the omni-channel or aggregate approach, how are you deciding to implement a seamless consumer frequency cap?
Frequency caps again. Awesome. So interestingly, we're looking at it kind of in silos. So for a little history, Dave & Buster's really just started investing in digital in 2022. So before that, it was all very much like linear TV. And so for us, we're still looking at it in silos, but we do know that similar to what was previously said, like when we have promotions that we may put on like direct mail and then on social and email, that multiplier across those channels really does drive an impact versus if we were just, sending the offer through email.
So my answer is going to vary with the frequency cap, and I am, again, SCM, so I'm not on the social display world. However, I do have a consumer opinion on these kind of stuff, like being the guy on social platforms. So I know that everybody has their number, saying like, I think back in the day, it used to be 4 was like the number that was being touted, like four times frequency and no more, and don't do that. And then, but now you hear like numbers like 10, 12, like 16, like what's the sweet spot? And I don't think there really is a sweet spot. I think you have to look at what platform that you're advertising on, and then what other competitors that you're sharing that inventory with, and then how often are they being shown to your target as well too. So I mean, I can come out here and say like, oh, we're showing our ad 14 times in a day, but we're still not really getting that audience to come. Well, that's because the other times, that's the other 14 times, right, that outside of that, Credit Karma is showing up, SoFi is showing up, Lengo is showing up, and you're in a constant battle of this user being pulled one way or the other about like brands. So like, person saw LendingTree, it's like, oh, LendingTree, Credit Karma, oh, SoFi, like their attention gets pulled all the time. So that's why I say like it varies. Like your frequency cap has to vary, and you just have to go by the data and then like kind of stick with it, but also be ready to adapt, because a year from now, as social platforms become bigger and bigger, there's going to be more competitors on it. It's going to cost more to get in those frequency caps. And then it might actually even be hard to get those frequencies just because there's just much more competitors in the same space. So that's just my answer, my non-frequency answer.
Honestly, for me, like frequency capping mostly relies on a cookie. So that can really only happen with Chrome. And now in the age of, like, when Chrome goes away in June, how are you going to do frequency capping? Let's be honest, how? And for me, it almost means that we have to flirt a line of really pissing off our customers that already have the product, because we don't know that they have the product now. So I would almost recommend having a lower frequency capping, so we toe that line of not pissing off the customers that have it. But then in the age of hyper privacy but expected personalization, that kind of contradicts itself. And so, but we're still expected to do both. So I would almost kind of think, okay, let's have a lower frequency cap, get people to the site, and then have a really robust first-party ad network, first-party cookie network on our own site, have a seamless login experience, so then we can do that hyper-personalization once they're on the site entirely. That's kind of where my mind is going. But you never know, new technology could come out.
So because I was very poor in time management on this, we're going to hop to the last question rather than going through the next 7 that I have. Apologies in advance. So let's just.
But at least we got frequency cap in there.
There we go. So on my final question about frequency, no. This is the wrap-up question for everyone. Do you believe that omnichannel is the wave of the future for advertising in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is now, and really making sure that you have that, tech stack and data integration on the back end to really, have that seamless consumer journey so that you can deliver tailored experiences is going to be key when you're trying to deliver across any business goal.
And not only is it now, it's almost like the technology is forcing us to go that way because of the rise of the Google Performance Max, where they're connecting multiple channels, for one performance goal to go after. But at the same time, you got 2024 generative AI search is going to be publicized, and my understanding is that both SEM and SEO is going to have to end up working together, because when you're thinking about AI search chat, content is going to be the king. So that's another huge shift in what I believe each organization has to do. They have to focus more on the content and how users interact with that content. And then at the same time, you also have to think about trying to be one of the answers within Gen AI search, right? So like when ChatGPT first came out, I did the media search of like, give me the top 5 financial institutions or whatever. LendingTree was never mentioned. So it's like, oh crap, I gotta work on something, to get LendingTree to be in top 5 of this organic answer, right? Like, or the AI has to be taught some way in shape or form. So again, content is going to be king, but at the end of the day, technology is kind of forcing us to go that way from a platform perspective.
Yeah, a similar answer. Obviously, JP Morgan was first in that result, right?
Maybe. I know they were in top 5. I don't know if they were first, but yeah.
But yeah, it has to be the future. If you want to have any type of insight into any of your ad media and how they play together, it has to be the future. Yeah, and that's kind of what I've seen. Like if you don't, then your ROI is going to suffer. You're not going to get as much budget the next month because if you can't prove the attribution of that budget, they're not going to give it to you. So you kind of have to move towards the omni strategy to retain your budget, to retain your current ROI.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. Hold the applause. Hold the applause. Any questions from the audience? Or you can do a round one for me. I'll do one. Okay, guys. What is your favorite media channel?
Obvi search.
Obviously.
This is a trap, isn't it?
You don't know me well enough to say that.
Search.
I'm going to say social because there's social search.
Oh, tricky.
I'm glad you said social search because I've been really trying hard to get Lending Tree to get on Pinterest. So I'm a search guy, but like I am starting to kind of go into the social world because I do believe that social is going to be like the channel in the future, just because the way that the direction is going that way with the young folks and whatnot.
Well, they are pitching themselves as a search engine.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that yet, but yeah.
Okay, we have one over here.
Cool. This question's for Annie. You mentioned hyper-personalization on the site. Are you guys using a CDP, or how are you managing that?
We are attempting to build our own first-party ad network. And we also have an entire team called Owned Media. I don't know if you've come to our site, but we don't really have buttons to click on, like, learn more. We literally have on-site ads, and that's called Owned Media. And that's powered by an entirely different decision engine that's very customized.
Okay.
Hi, Jacqueline, PGA Tour. Question about brand consistency and maintaining the value of your brand across all these different channels, as they all require like unique creative and stuff like that. I just want to know how you guys are kind of trying to make sure all that works together.
We try and do message and brand consistency across brands, or across channels, but we do it by audience. So we'll select women 25 to 34. Men who like to travel, and we go and pull all the data of where they hang out, what they do, and we try and do a consistent message from direct mail to linear and CTV down to search messaging, and just try and overlay several degrees of audiences on it. Sometimes they cross over, but we find that's been more effective.
Yeah, I feel like that would be my answer. We are doing it at an audience level, and essentially, I feel like because the team is very consolidated in like our creative team and they work across all those channels, it makes it also a lot easier to make sure that the messaging is consistent. But first starting with the particular audience that we're trying to engage with.
So you kind of called out my organization here a little bit because we don't currently align our messaging across different channels, because I mentioned that every channel is currently direct response. So you got social doing one thing, display doing one thing, and then SEM doing one thing. And it's a kind of a limited experience because display is saying like, hey, here's, the home equity, blah, blah, blah. They have their one messaging is very generic. And then SEM is like very like tactical. It'll be like, hey, 4.9% HELOC, like very, very granular. So like it's so disconnected. But again, having to evolve into the omnichannel, we are finally starting to kind of create this like more of a marketing powwow where we're all sharing different ideas of messaging, and then eventually, once the creatives, like the image creatives or the video creatives is done, that is actually now being shared with my team. So then we can watch it, review it, and then change our ad copies as necessary. So it's not the most robust thing that we're doing right now, but we're kind of heading towards that direction.
Same.
And on that note, those wide words from Annie. Thank you guys so much. Now, I did know that there is a Dave & Buster's in Salt Lake City, so we will be going there for the after party, and I can't wait to see how Yvette measures the performance of all of us coming there.
I mean, I do have a gold card, so we could definitely do that.
Is there a non-branded ad we can click on?
Let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you guys.